Welcome to the 170th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with David Zeltser, author of Lug Dawn of the Ice Age, How One Small Boy Saved Our Big Dumb Species. Stay tuned for the interview. The Reading and Writing Podcast is sponsored by the book-loving nerds at Riffle. Riffle is an online book community that connects readers with authors and books that they'll love. Readers use Riffle to find the next book that they want to read. And authors use Riffle to make their books stand out and drive sales. Join the Riffle community today at rifflebooks.com. That's rifflebooks.com. And look for the link in the show notes as well. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is David Zeltser, author of Lug, Dawn of the Ice Age, How One Small Boy Saved Our Big Dumb Species. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Sure. Well, can you read a few pages from your new novel, Lug, Dawn of the Ice Age?
I would love that. All right, so this is chapter 2. The memories came back like a sudden volley of stones whacking me on the forehead. Trouble had begun when I'd leaned out of a dank hunting cave by the river that morning and peeked around at a herd of macrauchenia. The beasts had stood half deep in the oozing mud of the riverbank, sucking up the brown water with their flexible little trunks and dumping it into their big, toothy mouths. I had felt the cool wind gusting through the trees and shivered. For months now, it had seemed to me that our normally steamy jungle air had been slowly getting colder. The usually shiny green leaves on the gourd trees were a strange yellowish brown and now carpeted the forest floor. The beautiful red and violet orchids that normally grew in the sunny spots of the jungle had paled and shriveled. Even the gourd fruit, whose fuzzy pink shells my clanfolk used to cover their private bits, were smaller this year, resulting in many uncomfortable glances and awkward silences. I'd asked around, and no one could remember seeing so many bare trees, not to mention bare bottoms. In my head, a small warning voice had been growing louder and louder. Lug, the voice kept saying. This is big. I could stop there or keep going. What would you prefer,
That sounds good. That sounds good. Well, if someone listening hasn't heard about Lug yet, how would you describe your novel?
It's a tough one to summarize. Maybe the best thing is I'll read you I'll tell you. What I think is sort of the best one-line description or two-line description would be a misunderstood cave boy who'd rather draw pictures than bash heads, and he's got nasty bullies on his tail, and he's surrounded by cavemen who think the coming ice age is just a little weather.
That's great. Well, my 10-year-old son read Lug, and he had a few questions. First, how did you decide on naming your protagonist Lug? Do you remember if there was a specific moment?
I think he started out as Glug, and then I realized I wanted to name the dad Big Lug, and so the son became Lug.
Gotcha. Well, have you always written for kids, or was this something that developed? I mean, when you started working on Lug, did you ever think about it as possibly working on a novel for adults, or was it something that you had always wanted to write for kids?
I think I just wanted to write this particular story, and I didn't necessarily. I sort of let the story tell me who the main character was, and I think that often determines kind of the main target age range for the book is who your main character's age. I try to write everything I write, I try to write in a way that I'm enjoying it. And I guess I'm a big kid, but I want adults to experience it on another level and enjoy it on another level. So that's always my goal. So whether I'm writing something for adults, I would want kids to be able to experience it too and enjoy it as well. So it's probably the best piece of praise my book got was from Peter Larangis, because he said kids and adults alike will love this book, and that to me is that's my goal when I'm writing.
Sure. Well, I know that you have a background in science before writing Lug. Do you have a sense of why kids are sometimes more open to thinking and talking about global warming and the science behind global warming versus some adults these days?
Yeah, I think it's I think there's two reasons. I think first of all, adults often come into any kind of question where there's ramifications for their own behavior with an agenda, and I think kids often approach things with an kind of an open mind and an open heart, and the goal here is to not so much to convince anyone of anything, but to open up the question in a way that's entertaining and interesting, and to satirize some of the ways in which adults have denied sort of basic science. And my take on the whole approach as far as the satire was, I didn't want this just to be sort of a dry satirical work either, like just purely kind of making fun of something. I really wanted it to have its own beating heart and tell a story. So whether or not you're interested in climate change, I wanted it to be a great tale, but definitely I was also interested in the satirical aspect of climate change denial and some of the ironies involved there.
Sure. Well, I know that you have more Lug books planned. Do you have a number in mind at this point? Have you written additional ones? I know you're publishing a second one next year. What's your plans for the series?
So, So the next one I'm very excited about. It's called the series is obviously Lug, and then the subtitle is Blast from the North. It's called that because there's something very big and mysterious coming from the north. There's also a really important new character named Blast, and just because I had a blast writing it, and hopefully it'll be a blast to read.
Great. Well, how was the transition for you going from a career in science to a creative career in writing and illustrating for kids? Had you always written while you were pursuing science as well? What was that process like for you?
I'd always read a ton. What happened was that my senior year at Harvard, I was all ready to go to grad school and study. I'd sort of finished up all my classes and was ready to go to grad school in theoretical physics. And I was going to apply that year. And a friend of mine who had gone away for he'd become my best friend. He went on a trip to a national park, and his name was Chija Fu. And when I heard that he'd been struck by lightning, and killed, basically it changed everything for me. I sort of, I put everything aside that I had planned to do, and just spent my senior year exploring. He was a real explorer at heart, and he just inspired me, and I felt like I needed to see where this would take me, and put aside whatever I was planning. So I basically just spent that year trying to figure out what I was about. I decided that I really wanted to do things that involved more imagination and connection with people, and there happened to be a play contest at Harvard that a friend and we co-wrote a play, and we're lucky enough to win, and the prize was that it was produced. So then that led me to screenwriting and all kinds of just exploration. I wrote advertising on the side to pay the bills, and tried to figure out, what I wanted to write. And it really wasn't until I actually had my daughter, she's now 4, that I really kind of figured out, my voice and my style, and what exactly I'm focused on. But it all that writing and all that exploration involved a lot of volunteer jobs. I did a lot of work with wildlife in different countries and around the U.S. and just So it's a long, complicated story, but it all started with my friend with that tragic event.
Wow, that's an interesting story. It really made you reassess your life and what you wanted to do.
Oh yeah.
And when I'm curious, when you were working on like the screenplays and the play that you mentioned that won, was that material that would be considered for adults, or was it, as we discussed earlier, that when you wrote something that you would want it to be appreciated by both adults and kids?
That particular one was for adults. But again, it had a sort of a playful element, and some kid characters, and I always sort of try to mix it up. My Lug has some interesting adult characters, especially the sequel, as well. And so I always try to create things that, I personally would enjoy. And I feel like, we're all kind of kids at heart in some way. That's almost the best side of us, that part that we've preserved from our childhood. So I always want to connect with that, and I feel like we all people share that. That's
Sure.
the part that that most inspires me. So I'm also really interested. I have a picture book coming out next year, and with my picture books, I feel like that's another medium where it has so much amazing potential to connect to adults as well as kids. Those are my favorite picture books, or the genius books that do both, that make the grown-ups who are reading to their kid laugh or cry or whatever it is, feel something. And that is, anything I write, that's what I aspire to.
Sure. And can you tell us about that picture book, Ninja Baby? I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, sure. That one was inspired by my daughter, who that was a nickname for her that we came up with. So my wife Fiona and I, that one is about it's about a couple of things, but it's about being first-time parents. It's about what it's like to have a kid with a really lively spirit, and then there's a part that's more imaginative because we only have one child. But what happens when that kid who is kind of the center of the world when a sibling comes along, who we in the book call the Kung Fu Master. So it's again, it's a lot of fun in terms of, for kids, there's a lot of action and humor, but then for parents, there's an element of being able to hopefully relate to the struggle of being a first time parent. So with that one, I was lucky enough to work with Melissa Manlove, who's an amazing editor at Chronicle, and they brought on board Diane Good, who was a Caldecott Honor illustrator, who just she took the book to a whole other level with her art. I mean, it's hilarious now, thanks largely to Diane and Melissa.
That's great. That's great. Well, given your creative path to your success in having Lug published and Ninja Baby next year, and what you just described earlier in this interview, I'm curious, what advice would you have for aspiring writers who may be listening and hope to have their own novels or stories published one day? I think my biggest piece of advice would be to write what you love personally, what you want to like imagine what you want to read, and then try to find that and try to read it and try to enjoy it as much as as you can find. And then when you can't find anymore, and you still feel like, oh man, I really would love to read something about this or that, then write it. And that way you'll it's not work. And I would say the other thing is to really kind of make sure that, this is the thing you love to do. In other words, some people I feel like want to become an author, or they want to have written rather than, write. And I think that honestly, that makes a lot of sense. I think that, it's, that's, you just be honest and say, okay, what else do I love to do? If there's anything you love to do more, do that. But if there isn't, if it's really your calling, if you genuinely enjoy the writing itself and the creating of the story, and you're writing something you love, I really don't think you can go wrong. I mean, honestly, even if you don't get published, you still have spent your time doing the thing you love. And so I would say just to be, just really honest with yourself and make sure you're having fun the whole time. And if those things are happening, I think you can't really go wrong. That's great advice. So what books or writers have inspired you as a writer over the years, either recently or classic books?
I'm just going to look at my shelf. Because, let's see. So I would say early on, Douglas Adams, Lewis Carroll, definitely Woodhouse, all the P.G. Woodhouse books, all the Roald Dahl books. More recently, I love Mr. Stink by David Walliams. I love reading to my daughter. I love as far as novels, all the Bruce Coville books. And I was so excited when he blurbed my book. Linda Sue Park, all her books, Tom Engelberger, of course, J.K. Rowling. So that's just a quick scan of my shelf right now in front of me.
That's great. Well, where can people find you online? And I should note that there's a really cool trailer for video for Lug that people can check out. But where can people find you?
Let's see. So I think the best place is just go to my website, which is just davidzeltser.com. That has sort of links to everything. I also want, by the way, I wanted to say one of my recent favorites is Gordon Corman's Swindle. I came to that a little later than most, but that is an amazing middle grade series. But yeah, my website is a great place to start.
Great. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well so people can find it. Well, again, we've been speaking with David Zeltser, author of Lug Dawn of the Ice Age, How One Small Boy Saved Our Big Dumb Species. The book is available now, so go grab a copy. And David, thanks for doing this interview.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks.
You should be saving for the future, but savings accounts suck, and investing can be scary. We combine the ease of savings with the real returns of investing. We call it Save Vesting, and it's only available in our new app, Stairs. Stairs offers 4 to 6% returns, no fees, and you can withdraw anytime. Do your future a favor. Visit stairsapp.com today.